Hi, this is Liz, friendly neighborhood reference librarian and cinephile, and these are my movie picks. It's Women's History Month, so we're going to talk about women in film. Now, women have been a part of the film history since its inception, with Alice Guy Blanche being not only one of, if not the first female directors, but one of the first filmmakers ever. However, women have been and still statistically are underrepresented in the fields of directing, writing, cinematography, pretty much everything. Not to mention being a woman of color in the film industry. Now, I am just talking Hollywood. There are places in the world that do not have the stark disparity that our industry does. However, the overall face of a film director is still a man and, white guy if we're talking about the United States. So why am I talking about directors rather than movies? Well, that's because instead of films, I'm going to talk about directors, specifically women directors you should know. First off, we are going to start with Kathryn Bigelow, the only woman to ever win an Oscar for director. That's right, the only one in over 90 years. It's all they could find. Kathryn Bigelow is probably most famous for her Oscar-winning film, The Hurt Locker, an action drama centered around the Iraq War. Action has always been Bigelow's bag, but rather than show action for action's sake, like Michael Bay, she prefers her films to be more visceral. Her first big film was Near Dark, a movie about nomadic vampires, and her first big hit was Point Break, and that gave us Keanu Reeves hunting Patrick Swayze's surfing criminal gang. At first glance, her movies may seem kind of slight, but they always have a personal touch and an unforgettable feel. Speaking of Oscars, here's someone who should have been nominated this year, Debra Granik, director of 2018's fantastic Leave No Trace. Granik hit it big with 2010's Winter's Bone, which launched Jennifer Lawrence's career. Granik likes to keep her films intimate, turning away from green screens in favor of rural surroundings. In addition to directing films centered on women, Granik also likes to use local and non-professional actors for her films. If you haven't seen the movies I mentioned or her first film, Down to the Bone, do yourself a favor. Next, we are going to a woman who is currently revolutionizing the industry, Ava Duvernay. Ava started out making small features like Middle of Nowhere before she hit it big with Selma, which was nominated for Best Picture, the first Best Picture nominee to be directed by a Black woman, and the fact that she didn't get nominated for director caused controversy. And she also directed the Academy Award nominated the 13th. Last year, she directed A Wrinkle in Time and is continuing her work producing Queen Sugar. Most importantly, Duvernay is using her clout in the industry to help other women get a foot in the door, be it writing, directing, or behind-the-scenes work. So the first three women I mentioned obviously worked their way up. Here is a director that many people kind of wrongfully assume had her career handed to her, and that's Sophia Coppola. And if that name sounds familiar, that's because her dad is the legendary director himself, Francis Ford Coppola. Sophia's been on the big screen since she was an infant. She was the baby in the baptism scene in The Godfather. She was a little girl on the boat in Godfather 2. She made her adult acting debut in Godfather 3, and let's just say it was not well received. But she redeemed herself with her debut feature in a favorite film of mine, The Virgin Suicides, and won an Oscar for her screenplay for Lost in Translation. While her films kind of have a limited scope, they usually involve wealthy white people, she does have a way of showing young women's lives, journeys, and personalities in a way that isn't mocking or exploitative. So we're going from Hollywood royalty to punk rock with Penelope Spheeris. Penelope Spheeris is best known for directing Wayne's World, but she made her mark in the 80s with Suburbia, a coming-of-age movie about a bunch of runaway and non-conforming kids just trying to survive. She actually recruited punks and street kids rather than cast trained actors. And she also gave us one of the best music documentaries ever, The Decline of Western Civilization. If you want punk rock filmmaking in the truest sense of the word, go look up Penelope Spheeris. Next, we're going to another woman. She's best known for directing comedy. Who says women aren't funny? It's the dearly departed Penny Marshall. I mean, what else can you say? Big is one of the most beloved comedies ever. A League of Their Own is a quotable treasure, and her dramatic feature Awakenings got a Best Picture nomination. So I'm just going to take the opportunity to tell you to check out the flawed Jumpin' Jack Flash and her older movie, Riding Cards with Boys. Continuing with comedy, we have Amy Heckerling. You think I'd forget her? As if. Best known for Clueless and one of my favorite comedies, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Heckerling is like Sophia Coppola in that she makes movies about young women but shows them as three-dimensional human beings rather than cruel, catty, or hypersexualized. In fact, go compare the way Jennifer Jason Leigh and Phoebe Cates' scenes are shot in Fast Times as opposed to the male-directed movies about high school and sex from the 1980s. You will see a world of difference. For example, they actually get to be characters. When asked about how she felt about the fact that so few films are directed by women, she said it's a disgusting industry. And she's not wrong. Moving on to a more minimalist filmmaker, we have Kelly Reichardt. She is an indie queen known for movies like Wendy and Lucy, Certain Women, and Meek's Cutoff. She likes to focus on women, in some cases women on the edge of society. Her film Wendy and Lucy, for example, focuses on a transient woman and her dog. She also frequently collaborates with actress Michelle Williams and, in my opinion, gets some of the best work out of her. Another indie queen, or should I say an indie queen turned big director on the rise, is Dee Ruiz. Ruiz came to fame and acclaim with the movie Pariah, a movie about a black teen girl becoming aware of the fact that she's a lesbian, one of the few coming-of-age films about LGBTQ black girls. She then went on to direct Queen Latifah in the biopic of Bessie Smith, and last year received a Best Adapted Screenplay nomination for Mudbound, which she also directed. She was the first black woman to be nominated for an Oscar in that category. Look for her next feature, The Last Thing He Wanted, which is based on the Joan Didion novel. Speaking of Oscar first, we have Mira Nair, the first Indian woman to direct a movie nominated for an Oscar. Salam Bombay was the film, nominated for Best Foreign Language Feature. She's directed everything from comedies like Mississippi Marsala to dramas like The Namesake to Disney films like Queen of Katwe. But if you want to see her best film, go look up the amazing, lyrical, and charming Monsoon Wedding. So we're going to rewind a bit and talk about Chantal Akerman. Born in Belgium, Akerman was involved in film from about the late 60s until her death in 2015. Her most well-known feature, Jeanne Dillman, is a look at the daily grind of a widowed mother, and it's considered both a feminist masterpiece and a masterpiece of realism. And while her films did deal with women's lives, be it sex, domesticity, and other issues, Akerman didn't like for her movies to be labeled women's movies, partly because she knew that the women's label meant that they wouldn't be taken as seriously. Unfortunately, she took her own life in 2015, but her work lives on. And many filmmakers have been influenced by Akerman, including our next director, Karyn Kusama. Now, I've mentioned her before in my horror episode recommending her films Jennifer's Body and The Invitation. Kusama's movies often like to focus on how women move through the world, and women with some grit. She's never afraid to show women being tough, mean, or even unlikable. Check out her other movies, Girl Fight and the recent Destroyer. Just don't check out Aeon Flux. Moving on to the woman who directed Christian Bale in one of his most iconic roles, but gets no credit for it. Talking about Mary Harron. So, once upon a time, there was a novel called American Psycho. It was about Patrick Bateman, a wealthy investment banker with a sociopathic and psychotic side. While author Bret Easton Ellis tends to revel in how awful and violent his character is, Mary Harron knew the angle that she wanted to take when she was set to direct the adaptation. Before we were talking about bro culture and toxic masculinity, she made a whole movie about it. I think she got how awful Patrick Bateman was even more than Ellis, and the movie, nor Christian Bale's performance, would be nearly as good or as memorable if not for her. It's one of the most political horror films of all time, in my opinion. And the fact that Harron did not immediately get more high-profile directing gigs is a crime. But she does keep busy, most recently directing Sarah Polley's adaptation of Margaret Atwood's Alias Grace, which is way better than the Handmaid's Tale adaptation, by the way. Finally, we are closing with two women that revitalized the sci-fi genre with one movie, The Matrix. That's right, we're talking about Lily and Lana Wachowski. Both Lily and Lana are transgender women, and while they were not out at the time of making The Matrix, that does not diminish their gender, their journey, or their accomplishment. Almost 20 years later, The Matrix is still an inspiration for style and action scenes in film, and the success of the film made studios more eager to invest in sci-fi and in lesser-known creators. Lily and Lana have always followed their passion, giving us probably the best US-made live-action anime in Speed Racer, adapting the hard-to-adapt Cloud Atlas, and creating the beloved cult hit Netflix show Sense8, a show that celebrates our differences, finding your family, and the power of community. So thank you, Lily and Lana, not only for your creations, but for being yourself. And that's a wrap. There's so many more women I could cover, so I'll just leave you with a quick list of a few movies to check out. The Babadook by Jennifer Kent, Mustang by Denise Ergevin, Lady Bird by Greta Gerwig, Daughters of the Dust by Julie Dash, Wonder Woman by Patty Jenkins, American Mary by the Soska Sisters, The Rider by Chloe Zhao, Persepolis Marjane Satrapi, Yentl by Barbra Streisand, Oh Lucy by Atsuko Hirayagami, Boxing Helena by Jennifer Lynch, and Revenge by Coralie Pajot. Or female directors like Agnes Varda, Elaine May, Lynn Ramsey, Jane Campion, Claire Dennis, Lucretia Martel, Nicole Holosiffer, or Marielle Heller. I mean, point is, women are killing it in film. If you need any recommendations, come find me at the Derry Public Library's information desk. And thank you to DerryCAM, Derry Community Access Media, empowering independent voices. And I'll see you in April with my new secret topic. See you next time.